Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Other Illinois podcast. My name is Russ Clark, and today we're going to be talking about highway funding. Highway funding in Illinois is typically done in a 5-year cycle that differs from the gubernatorial election cycle in an effort to try and prevent interference from the General Assembly and the governor's office in steering money towards projects that is politically advantageous for them. This is also part of a constitutional amendment that was passed in 2018 that basically took road money that's generated by the sales of gasoline and diesel here in the state of Illinois and sending it only to transportation projects. Now, when the General Assembly enacted the bill to set up the highway funding mechanism after the constitutional amendment had passed, they had done a number of things to make sure that mass transit did receive a portion of that funding, but the vast majority of it was to go to road construction and road maintenance here in the state of Illinois. So I want to talk about that. This is actually going to be for those of you who may be listening on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. This might be better to view on YouTube so that you can actually see the slides and what I'm talking about, because it's going to be somewhat difficult if you don't know where the Illinois Department of Transportation districts are. So we're actually going to bring that up right now. So this is the region map of the state of Illinois, and IDOT operates 9 districts, 5 regions. They basically radiate out from the Chicagoland area. So Chicagoland is Region 1. It's also its own district. And then Region 2 is basically Northern Illinois, including Rock Island. And then District 3 covers maybe South Chicagoland, and it goes down as far south as Ford County. District 4 is basically Peoria and west to the Mississippi River. District 5 is the university counties of McLean County and Champaign County, and going all the way into Paris, Illinois. District 6 is Springfield and west. And District 7 is basically, if you were to draw a line from Decatur south to Centralia and east, that's District 7. District 8 covers the Metro East region of St. Louis. And District 9 is basically Carbondale and south to the Kentucky border. Now, when we talk about miles, we actually want to, lane miles is a good metric to use when we're talking about interstate highway funding, because obviously in District 1, you may not have a lot of centerline miles, but of those highways that you have, they're going to be multi-lanes. So I took this from IDOT and evaluated came up with a pretty good estimate for how many lane miles are in each district. And in District 1, 21% of the highway in the state of Illinois is within the Chicagoland area, which again makes sense. Most of the interstates are going to be multi-lane. You've got a lot of improved state highways that act as city streets or things of that nature. And then every other district in the state has roughly about 10%. If you get into Springfield, the Springfield district, District 6, they are at 12%, and Metro East is 11.5%. So that's a good way to think about it. Chicago has about 20%, and the rest of the state has about 80% of the highway miles here in the state of Illinois. And this is a list of just, again, what counties are covered by, what IDOT district they have, and provided population counts. These counts are by county, but 65% of the state's population is in District 1. And then the rest of the districts have somewhere between 2 and 5% of the state's population. So I want to go over how fuel taxes are generated. Now, we have one of the nation's highest gasoline taxes in the country. Every gallon of gasoline is taxed at 48.3 cents. 19 of that is directly off of a per gallon gasoline, and then 29.3% is generated off of the sales tax that goes into the Transportation Renewal Fund. And it's the Transportation Renewal Fund that we're going to be really highlighting today, because that's what caused a major shift in highway funding this year for 2026. Now, for diesel, we actually, unfortunately, the state of Illinois charges more for diesel. That is a total of 55.8 cents for diesel fuel, because there's a diesel differential rate that's dedicated to the transportation fund. So we basically have an additional 7.5 cents that are tacked on for diesel. Now, and diesel makes sense because most of the vehicles that are buying diesel in the United States are going to be semi-trucks or full-sized pickup trucks. So the wear and tear on the roads that those vehicles generate due to the weight of the vehicles and the loads that they're carrying means that they need to contribute a little bit more to highway funding than, say, a gasoline-powered vehicle. There are grants that are basically given to municipalities and counties and road districts and townships based on either a per capita basis or on a mileage basis to help with those costs. And as you can see right here on the slide, Cook County gets in a direct additional funding resource separate from the rest of the state. So already Cook County is getting a little bit more disproportionate funding based off gasoline sales. And then, so this is a pretty complex map, and I actually want to talk about this here right now to discuss the things that were going to be shifted and why they're going to be shifted. So this was generated out of the 2019 General Assembly as to how to split up the fuel taxes. You've got the motor fuel tax fund, which is basically the direct sales or direct taxes on gasoline. And those basically either go to help pay administration costs for IDOT and things like that. After all those set-asides are taken out, 54% of that money goes to local governments, and another 40, with the remainder going into the state construction account. And what is in the remainder is split 2/3 going into the road fund, 1/3 going into the state construction account. Now, the road fund is what has been directly impacted by legislation that was passed in 2025. So I want to highlight that. So the road fund receives one pot of money from the motor fuel tax fund. Now, the Transportation Renewal Fund is basically supposed to be split up 20% to mass transit districts and another 80% to roads and bridges. And then that gets broken out. 60% goes to the state, 40% goes to local governments directly. So the local share of the gasoline and fuel and special fuel tax, i.e. sales tax on gasoline and diesel, those local percentages have not been touched at all. So your local city and your local counties are still receiving the correct proportion, the same proportions of gasoline and diesel sales taxes that they were receiving for the 2025 bill. How you get there from state highway or interstates is going to be directly impacted in this year and future years. Now, the 20% that was going to mass transit, Chicago Transit got 90% of that money, and 10% was shared to the rest of the state. Now, in 2025, there was a direct change to the goal percentage funding of transportation here in Illinois. The governor's office generated this graph, and it shows that 52% of the funding is supposed to be going to the northern districts, with Chicagoland directly receiving 35%, and then the downstate counties receiving 48%, which in and of itself is not the worst thing in the world. But let's take a look at it, what it was under the last Browner administration. So the last year of the Browner administration was in 2021 because that 5-year plan was implemented under his administration. So it actually follows fairly closely to the lane miles for the state of Illinois. The Chicago area still receives the largest portion of the funding, but you've actually got 50% going to the I'll call it the universities district. That's McLean and Champaign counties and further east. And then the next biggest downstate is District 8. That's the Metro East district. So that, in my opinion, this kind of makes sense for given where the lane miles are in the state versus how much of the pie there is to split up. This looks fairly appropriate. Now that changed in 2022, which was Governor Pritzker's first 5-year plan. And as you can see here, that's where we've got the split percent, 59% of the funding going to upstate districts and 41% being the downstate districts. And it's almost flipped per the lane miles that IDOT is having to manage in the state. In 2023, there was a funding crisis, and it wound up being that not only was the budget vastly going to District 1, but also there was less funding available. So there was only, we went from a $4 billion budget to about a $2 billion budget. So 2024, we went back to the same. And as you can see here, it seems to be an even bigger split. The Metro East counties are still receiving a portion of the funding, but the Central Illinois is really hurting as far as construction projects go. And 25, same story here. Now, I want to go back to this map again just to highlight that the vast majority of Democratic districts are only in District 1, the Chicagoland area, and then District 8, which is the Metro East area. So even though those are the two biggest population centers within the state, they are also generating more of the gasoline sales taxes. But for diesel, and I can assure you that District 2, District 3, certainly District 6 and District 7 are generating a lot of sales on diesel. So those diesel taxpayers are actually getting the shaft on this because you actually have more semi trucks traveling on those roads, but there's less money available to repair and maintain those roads. So in 2025, the Chicago Transit Authority was having a massive funding issue. Basically, it was coming within months of failing. There was about $1 billion shortfall that the Transit Authority was reporting. And the first thing that Governor Pritzker did was basically he shifted $200 million from the road fund every year to go into mass transit. Now, the road fund typically was for maintaining roads. The transit authorities get their own funding, again, out of that transportation account. So of that, $180 million went to Chicago Transit, and then $20 million got sent to the downstate mass transit authorities. But here is where you've got major changes. The Transportation Renewal Fund used to be split 80% for roads and bridges, 20% for mass transit. We've now flipped that. And it's now 20% for roads and bridges and 80% for mass transit. Now, again, this is the money that's coming off of sales taxes for gasoline and diesel. So we're basically propping up mass transit off of the sales of gasoline and diesel. And mass transit, they're not paying those same sales taxes because it's a government authority. So they're not kicking in any money from the sale of diesel to run buses or trains or what have you. So, and then we shifted the bill so that 85% of this much larger pie is now going to Chicago and 15% is going to everything else. And just off of last year's funding alone for what went into the Transportation Renewal Fund, this means that Chicago Transit is now receiving $884 million versus $234 million. So this is a 370% increase in their funding every single year from back what it was even in 2025. So right now, currently, Chicago area mass transit is getting at $1,064,000,000 from state transportation funds just this year. Now, this is not just a one-time thing. This is going forward for at least the next 5 years in the transportation 5-year plan. And this is coming from both road funds and sales tax money. So they were only getting about, let's call it 250 million. So, and again, you got to remember to add in that $180 million that they're getting every year from the road fund. So right now, state roads and bridges for 2026, that there's only $260 million that's coming out of that transportation renewal fund. And again, it's split 60-40. So your cities are getting a massive shortfall in road and bridge funding that they used to be receiving. And it's only going to be $104 million out of that fund. It should have been over 225 million. And now projects are being split, and I'll actually talk about this with the newly released 2026 funding plan. Upstate is now receiving almost $3 billion versus downstate's $2 billion. Now, also in 2026, there's a new sales tax hike that's specifically for Division 1. So not only will the state bear the brunt of it, but taxpayers in Lake, McHenry, Kane, DuPage, and will be paying an additional 1% to go into Chicagoland's mass transit and generating almost $500 million for that. So this is off of the 2026 funding for road projects. As you can see here, District 1 combined is going to be getting $2.17 billion. And that accounts for 44% of the budget alone. It's an increase of almost 7%. District 2 also saw an increase over 2025. And then the vast majority of downstate Illinois, they're seeing their budgets being cut somewhere between 5%, 7%. District 9, though, remember that's the Carbondale area, basically all the way down to the Kentucky border. They've received the biggest funding shortfall. The IDOT budget has been cut by 32%. So what does that mean for you, and what should you do if you live in downstate Illinois? Obviously, with this being an election year, there's only so much you can do. To be quite honest, I don't see Governor Pritzker's seat being in danger at all. To be quite honest, and he may actually receive a voting share increase, particularly in Division 1, which is the Chicagoland area, because he's brought more highway funding to that area than had previously been brought in. Also, he made everybody at the CTA happy, which nobody should be happy with that. The Chicago Transit Authority was basically run into the ground by successive mayoral administrations, and Mayor Brandon Johnson had such a difficult time with it that his first CTA head was a minister, not an engineer, not somebody who specializes in or has a degree in mass transit. We're hiring some guy that basically has a degree in divinity. I don't know why he made that choice. I don't live there. But is that somebody who should be managing transit authority that's got a budget of $2 to $3 billion every year? No. and it only costs someone $6 to ride the trains for the entire day in Chicago. If you were to actually adjust that for inflation, that all day pass should be at a much, much higher rate. About $12 is what I calculated. So until we actually see some fare increases at Chicago Transit so that Chicagoans are helping to pay for their own subway system, I don't understand why the rest of the state is basically sacrificing their road and bridges to pay for Chicago Transit. It's someplace that I can guarantee you most people in Carbondale are never going to use in a year. And certainly, even in the, I'll call it the collegial district, which is District 5, you've only got a certain portion of those people that may even look at using Chicago Transit during the year, because obviously they're coming down from the Chicagoland area to attend university. So again, let's go back to the original question. What can you do? There's a couple things I'll suggest. First of all, if you were considering voting for J.B. Pritzker and you live in the downstate counties, don't vote for the governor's race. He's going to get reelected. That's a given. It's not even a question. However, politicians do look at something that's called the undervote, which is basically the vote tally that they should have gotten based on a percentage of the number of Republicans or Democrats in a given voting district. If there's an undervote, it typically means that for a candidate, it means that there's a lot of displeasure with that person. And obviously with Governor Pritzker looking to run for the presidency, any undervote that's in downstate Illinois is going to be noticed by his campaign staff because they need those votes in 2028. Second of all, if you know your state rep, if you know your state senator, please contact them. Let them know that this is not okay. We need to go back to the original funding for 2027. Chicago Transit has gotten their bailout. It's time for them to start paying for their own transit, and for us to start repairing our roads and maintaining things. Because if it goes on like this for too long, basically what's going to happen is you're going to have deteriorating highways in downstate Illinois, and that's going to impact not only shipments that cross Illinois, but also grain and food deliveries as well, because a lot of those semi trucks that are moving grain from an elevator to a processing plant, or even from the field into the elevators, they need that diesel money to be reinvested back into those roads so they can deliver crops out of the field and into the food processing plants and onto Americans' tables. So this is a major, major issue that, while it may not look like it this year, it's going to build over time. And if we go another 5 years with Chicagoland receiving 60% of the state highway funding and the rest of the state receiving 40%, things are going to start breaking. So I hope you found this information enlightening, and I hope that you can come away with a good understanding of what's going to happen in the future. And please, 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 if you want to see more of this, like and subscribe. I hope you'll watch the next episode where we get into some of the political actions that are going on in the state of Illinois prior to the general election. I'll have some good information to share on that. So again, thank you very much. This is the Other Illinois Podcast, and have a good day.